Hey folks, looks like we're ready to go. Thanks, Bob. All right, welcome back. We are now moving on to item D3 on our agenda, and the subject for that is the evaluation of a demonstration parklet located on Main Street and recommended future actions. This would be Mr. Graham.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Irons.
Thank you.
Members of the council, as stated, this evening you have before you an evaluation of the parklet that we put in about 7 months ago. Some of the background behind the implementation of the parklet: it was a concept that was derived out of the local economic action planning process. It came along with the intent to expand park-like public gathering spaces in the downtown, to increase traffic in the foot traffic in the downtown, to increase the time customers and visitors spend in the downtown, hopefully to improve business in the downtown. And it was intended as a pilot or demonstration project with a subsequent evaluation process in a 6 month period. Again, it's about 7 now, but we did miss a council meeting, so we're here this evening to talk about it some more. Moving on to the next slide. We did, before putting the parklet in, conduct initial public outreach. That would have been in December of 2014. Spent about 10 hours or so talking to local business owners in the downtown, business owners and property owners in the downtown. We did receive somewhat of a mixed response from them, but most did support at least the concept or idea of doing something like the parklet in the downtown. We also, as part of that outreach, left informational flyers related to the parklet with the various business owners. The parklet design was put in place. It was designed by staff. It utilizes 2 parking spaces, and I think did result in the reconfiguration of a couple other spaces. It does provide 2 motorcycle parking spaces, bike parking. It includes planters and table seating. The parklet was constructed after the outreach in December. It was constructed in mid-January of 2015. It was constructed by city staff, city public works staff, for just under about $1,000. One of the issues that you see pointed out sometimes about it is the aesthetics of it and maybe the actual length of it. Some people think it's too long. From an aesthetic standpoint, I mean, that would be something that would probably be rectified in creation of a future parklet program. Where you would have at least some design standards that would go along with these types of things if the council chooses to continue down the road with the program or development of a program. Response to the demonstration parklet over the last 6 months has again been mixed. We did evaluate the parklet based on 3 components. We studied the availability of parking in the blocks surrounding the parklet. That was kind of one of the main issues with folks that were not in favor of the parklet. Was it takes up parking spaces on the street, and so we wanted to take a look at what the actual parking impacts were. Was there parking available? When was it available? That type of thing. We developed an online downtown revitalization survey, portions of which speak to the parklet. We evaluated traffic impacts from the parklet, wanted to see if the parklet slowed traffic down, had no effect. Also look at accident history over the 6 month period, 7 month period that has been installed. And on a separate note, we did also receive additional information from Linda Thomas of Coalesce Bookstore in the form of the parklet petition that she prepared with 1,500 signatures, and through the parklet survey that she circulated to the surrounding business owners on the block of the parklet. The parklet, moving on to the parking evaluation. We did take a look at the 2008 parking management study to see what it said about parking in the downtown. For the most part, in the area where the parklet is, there was no issue. In looking further into it for the placement of the parklet in that location, we did conduct parklet surveys of the parking on a 9-block radius in the downtown. These were done on 5 different days, spanning December to July. And through those time frames, we conducted parking counts on that 9-block radius 7 to 8 times a day. Area in this area in the center is where the parklet is located, and those are the 9 blocks that I was referring to earlier. The part we did conduct the last parking analysis was on Friday, July 3rd, which is one of the busiest days in the downtown, obviously leading up to the 4th of July weekend. The parking counts for that day were conducted at 8 times throughout the day between 10:45 and 4:40 p.m. Resulting from that there was anywhere from 16 to 56 spaces available in that downtown area. Specifically in that zone 1 where the parklet's located, there was an average of 3 open spaces at any given time, with at least 2 spaces available, with at least a minimum of 2 spaces available in that area at any given time when we went down there and reviewed it. Findings related to that is we found that the parking impact in the downtown is consistent with that was noted in the 2008 parking management study, meaning there was not much of a parking issue in the middle of the downtown. So the findings from the overall analysis was that there is adequate parking in the downtown, even on the busiest days of the year, and again supporting the 2008 parking management plan. Now, these findings don't mean that that the overall parking in the downtown can't be improved. They probably can through management, implementation of management techniques, and the addition of parking be improved over time. To that end, staff is currently working on plans to further plans and concepts to further improve parking supply and turnover in the downtown. Some of the areas of focus would include restriping some of the streets in the downtown to include angled or center lane parking, improve turnover through enforcement or paid parking scenarios. We're also looking at acquisition of rights for underutilized or vacant lots in the downtown, where we can maybe enter into private-public partnerships to create additional parking or parking lots. And you'll be hearing more about this coming forward. I think we're bringing forward to the council in September a report to discuss this further. So moving on to the revitalization survey that that staff prepared. We did prepare a online survey that has 9 questions, and to that survey we received 731 responses. I'm not going to go over all of the questions, but some of them are readily related to the parklet. Here's question 2. It says, how far is it reasonable for most local shoppers at most times of the day to walk from a parking spot to the store they want to go to? And you can see in there on the top it says no more than 5 spaces. That's the green bar up there, and you said that's less than 10%. 1 block or less, and it jumps way up to just over 30. 1 to 2 blocks, again over 30, and then when you get up to 2 to 3 blocks, that's down around 20, and 4 to 5 blocks you drop down below that 10% range. Question 3 of the survey was, what's your opinion of outdoor dining in Morro Bay? It's always kind of an interesting thing when you're dealing with a city with a tourist-driven economy. The answers came back. We had 691 respondents, and you have on the first green bar, you have just under 30% responding that they may not use it, but they're not against having more outdoor dining. You see the area in the center that's at 20%. It says we don't need any more outdoor dining. And then we need more outdoor dining, and that jumps way up to 50%. So very telling. I think not all that surprising given the downtown and the fact that we have a lot of tourists in town for at least 6 months out of the year. Question 4. It would be great if Morro Bay had 1 or 2 downtown blocks for pedestrian-only shopping and dining. You see a large spike at the top. That's for yes. It's 50%. You see no at just over 30, and then those who are sort of ambivalent are down there below 20%. And then getting on to specifically items related to the parking. Question 5, what is your overall impression of the parklet idea? At the top, you see just over 20%. I'm somewhere in the middle. The blue in the middle, I don't like it. Oh, sorry. The blue in the middle, I don't like it. And then I like it at the bottom, just over 40%. Question 6, would you leave Morro Bay's demonstration parklet where it is? You see the green at the top. Yes, I like it. Is just under 40. No, I don't like it. Is just over 30. It's a good idea, but I don't like the location. So you kind of take that with the I don't like it one, and you end up with something that's probably a little over 40%. And then you have some that are ambivalent, meaning I'm somewhere in the middle, just over, but probably approximately 15%. And then I think question 7, which is the last one I put in here, the statement describes me in the parklet and the demonstration parklet, and it's cut off on my slide here. Green bar at the top, I don't like it because it personally affects me negatively. That's about 25%. I like it and I want it to stay. That's about 35%. And it really does not affect me, which is the winner. And this one is 39, almost 40%. What you get out of this is kind of a mixed response and somewhat contradictory in certain terms, which is, I think, kind of interesting. I think if you move on to the overall conclusion from the survey results, you see, I think a majority of the respondents thought favorably, although there is sort of that sort of conflict between it where they say they like it and then maybe they don't, so I'm not really sure exactly what that means. Moving on to parklet safety. The Public Works Department evaluated the safety of the parklet through looking at at speeds adjacent to the parklet and looking at the accident history over the preceding 6-7 months. We placed traffic counters out there that counted not only traffic, numbers of cars driving by, but also the speeds that they were driving. We placed those counters on Main between Dunes and Harbor, on Main between Harbor and Morro Bay Boulevard, and on Main between Beach and Dunes, on Main from Beach to Dunes, sorry. The findings of the traffic study was that most of the cars in those areas were traveling below 25 miles an hour, which is the maximum speed limit in that area. Those were basically the speeds they were traveling before they put the parklet out there, so the idea is pretty much no effect from that standpoint. And then there were no accidents reported during the evaluation period. I did mention previously that Linda Thomas had provided the parklet survey and distributed that to local businesses, and also an anti-parklet petition. I think that focused mostly on concerns. Is that up there? Yeah. That the parklet took up valuable and much-needed parking on the streets. The petition received approximately 1,500 signatures over that 6-month period. One interesting component of that was approximately 80% were from non-residents, although given the nature of our economy here, that's not all that surprising. The city also conducted some outreach here in July, just before the preparation of the staff report. Staff polled business and property owners on the block of the parklet on Main. Feedback was again mixed, but more businesses noted favoring the parklet than were opposed to it. We had 6 business and property owners that strongly favored the parklet. Many others were neutral, and some are obviously strongly opposed. Again, mostly noting as that main topic of concern the parking issue, because the parklet took out a couple of parking spaces. Conclusions and recommendations. The information gathered over the last several months, again, reflects kind of a mix of support and opposition. Given the mix of responses and the amount of information that we've gathered, it's recommended that the City Council direct the evaluation of the parklet to the Recreation and Parks Commission and to the Planning Commission to obtain their input, and then have them bring a recommendation back to the City Council. The Recreation and Parks Commission and the Planning Commission would be asked to make recommendations to Council on the following items. That would be whether to keep the parklet in the current location, whether to develop a parklet program, or whether to remove the parklet and discontinue future parklet programming. The last item that you see there is a note that the RPC and PC meetings would be notified to the downtown business owners so that they would have the opportunity to attend and provide I think some additional and much needed input. With that, I'll conclude my presentation and be happy to answer any questions.
Great, Scott. And I'll start to the right this time on questions. Noah, you want to start us off?
Sure. I just have one question, and it is to Scott. We had a chance to touch base earlier today, but one of the directions of action, regardless of what happens with this particular parklet, is potentially to have the Planning Commission work with the community and staff and develop a program process for a business to apply for a parklet. And you were able to answer this for me earlier, but how much of a work effort would you anticipate that would be, considering all the other high priority projects you've got going on with the Planning Commission and your staff?
Well, I don't think it would be all that difficult because there are other parklet programs out there, and we would borrow liberally from those. So I would probably gather up some of that documentation for those programs and present those, show them to the Planning Commission, and we would probably choose policies and kind of create take the jigsaw puzzle and put it together for what we need to have in Morro Bay. So I don't know that it would be all that difficult of an effort. We would make use of existing materials that are out there.
Okay, and in relation to the parking side, you mentioned that there is already some work ongoing with analyzing parking issues, looking at solutions as you outlined in the slide, and then trying to merge that in with any sort of parklet program so that we're ahead of that curve. And if you want to just speak potentially to that a little bit.
Sure, absolutely. We are, as I stated, we're in the process of evaluating, parking opportunities, improving the parking situation in the downtown through implementation of angled parking, potentially where we have right now parallel parking to the curb so it can add spaces, or maybe even center line. I think we would be evaluating that and looking at areas where potentially we could place parklets, and because we wouldn't want to be putting the parking in the areas where those would probably be going. But we're also tapping into the 2008 parking management plan. We're kind of dusting that off. That gives a lot of direction about where this angled or center lane parking could be located. And so, again, we're going to be speaking more to that coming up here in September because we're bringing an item to you, I think, and then for discussion. So kind of letting you know what we're looking at doing and hoping we're getting the head nod from you to move forward because we'd like to, create some additional parking in the downtown because throughout this entire process, I think all of the conversations that I've had with the downtown business owners is that while we can show through the process of counting the spaces that there are spaces available, it seems like they'd prefer to have more down there, and so I think it's probably a valuable effort to pursue.
Thanks, Noah. John? Matt?
Yeah, I have a couple questions, Scott. One of the big questions arising through this last 7 months was the process of how this parklet came to be through the LEAP process, and then what a lot of folks would consider a limited outreach by planning. So how would you, what do you think is the proper sequence of events to implement such a parklet in the city?
Well, I think we would, again, work with the Planning Commission, develop a parklet program. This was a pilot demonstration parklet. It came out, the one that's there came out of the LEAP process. We wanted to sort of run forward with a quick win, implement one of the things that came out of that, just to kind of keep the ball rolling. That was kind of the idea behind it. And we thought this was something we could do. It was relatively inexpensive and could happen fairly quickly. So that's why it was fast. And that's why it was also the demonstration parklet, because we didn't go through the permitting process that you're going to be going through for other parklets, assuming we go down that road, put together a program. You're going to be going through a coastal development permitting process for most of these things in the future, I believe. So.
And what would you envision that sort of process being time-wise moving forward in terms of a parklet process that the city would adopt? How long would that take?
How long will it take to put the program in place?
Or likewise construct, say, for instance, one parklet.
So you're more asking on the lines of how long it would take an application to get approved once we have the program in place?
Yep.
30 to 45 days.
All right. And I think. Okay, so theoretically, then if this parklet were taken away and then the city adopted or came up with some sort of parklet process, if and when another spot were found, 30 to 45 days, we could have another parklet up and running.
After the development of the program, yes. We need to put the program parameters in place. take those through the process, have the city council take a look at them and approve them, and then we would be approving parklets subject to that document. So that, probably will take a few months.
Got it.
Christine.
Just a question about timing. So different than the other two questions about timing. My question is about if we follow the staff recommendation, when do you see this going to the Rec Commission? When would it go to the Planning Commission? How much longer would we extend the pilot process?
Well, I haven't spoken to Sam about when he was planning on taking it, but I was probably, on my side of things, looking at trying to hit the second meeting in September.
Okay.
And from my standpoint, September 19th.
Okay, so do you think it would go to Rec first or then Planning? Do you have any sense of what would make sense?
Ours is on the 15th?
So it will go to-
I'm hoping that the information provided to both bodies is the same so that they have the same set of factual data. So I'm actually hoping to rely on Mr. Graham there to provide me with that for RPC, which I think he's first, so it's perfect. I like it.
And that was how I thought it would probably work.
Okay.
We'd put it together and then
Teamwork, right.
Okay, great.
maybe I'd show up at his meeting and say hi to everybody.
Scare everyone. They'd think they were at the wrong meeting. Oh my
Maybe.
God, it's a planning
They're
meeting. I
lost.
thought I was on the Rec Commission.
That's right.
They just want to talk about. Okay, great. That's actually the only question I have right now. I think others may come up after public comment, but that's the one I have right now. Thanks.
Great, thanks. I want to start off with a question. Has Top Dog contacted the city with interest in maintaining the parklet? In other words, hey, I want this. I don't know what the program looks like, but I want to be in line to put one in since this is taking place?
The last time I talked to the owner, he favored it and liked it being there. I don't know.
I guess my question is, does he want the programs that we've discussed, and I guess we would envision based on that is for a parklet to take place, it would be, we create the program, but it's actually on the owner, and part of that it's at their expense. So I guess, is there still interest out there, knowing that it's under their expense, or is there still that kind of interest? And specifically, it's there in front of his business. I was just wondering if there's been any expressed interest that way.
So let me just touch one aspect of that, then turn over to Scott, and that is that out there are sort of two kinds of parklets. One is a public open space that is not directly associated with any single business, but is simply a public open space. And those could be almost anywhere, and again, not tied to a business. That is a public park. And so the cost of emplacing and maintaining that, it would be borne by the city, and that's what this demonstration was put in as a completely open public open space, and the cost was borne by the city. The other way that to do parklets is for businesses to petition to apply for a parklet that is directly benefits that business and is solely for the use of that business. So you sort of think outdoor seating at a restaurant or a cafe. In that case, and that's why it would take a little bit of time to develop the parameters for a parklet program. In that case, the business would bear the cost not only of construction, but some cost to be determined for taking up a parking space or two. And those are the sort of things we would have to work out. So this demonstration went in as a public park. It's open to all. But if you choose to have us further develop a program, then we would need to think about that, about the different ways that a business could buy into a parklet, essentially, or if the city would want to build additional public parklets. And with Top Dog specifically, this was the demonstration was put in as I said, as a city park, as a city space. I'm not sure if I haven't talked to Pat at Top Dog specifically about would he be interested in sort of purchasing and taking over that parklet for his business. Right now, it's an open spot for anybody that wants to sit down there.
I guess my comments, especially for that, as it rose out of LEAP, it was primarily as an economic development driver for enhancing business. And the component of, does the city take this on? Obviously, as you were speaking to that, it may be an option, but I think initially this was born through the business side of things, and I guess we have two. If we are going to pursue that, then I guess we have two questions on the table. Parklet for that the city wants to take on, or parklet for businesses, and maybe we can get into discussion later. But primarily, I understand that. And I think most people understand that this was put in by the city. There was some comments about it's for benefit for just Top Dog. Well, the intent wasn't to benefit any one business. The intent was to have a demonstration parklet. It just happened to land there. And the other question along with that is, if we had the program intact, I guess that may have subdued some of the comments about a parklet that benefits the owner, because as you're describing, well, if they're paying for it, then it's through a program and it's directly for their benefit. But I just want to get back to questions so we get into public comment. And the other thing, considering we had the question of whether or not other priorities, things like that, considering the workload, if we get into this, we were saying, okay, well, there are other programs out there that we can reach into and use as a template and work through that. And the one particular program that I reviewed, which the City of Pacific Grove, I know it took them over a year to do theirs. We've had this in for 7 months. I wouldn't necessarily consider that. And then comparatively, we were thinking that design guidelines could go through relatively quickly, and it took almost 9 months. So, the realistic side, I would expect a year, and it's not about how soon we can do it, but the approach in which we have proper input. And so, in my view, it's not about how soon we can get through it, but we gain the proper input to get the program. But along those lines, it does go back to priorities and workload. And considering all the work that we do have, parking being one of them, that kind of dovetails into how the parklet fits. So, I guess my question is, would it be better to evaluate our parking before we start pursuing this, or can we somehow dovetail them together? But I'm very sensitive about priorities and how this fits into it. Maybe you can respond.
Well, I do think, if we're going to start working on a program for parklets, that we need to sort of mesh that with looking at parking and where we're putting it, because we do have a plan that suggests where that parking would go. It gives various streets in the downtown and shows you have angled parking into the curb here, you have center lane parking here, and in those areas you probably can't put a parklet there because you wouldn't be able to get by there, I think, because it would remove in some instances, remove some of the parking that's adjacent to the curb. There's different scenarios in the parking management plan, so it's not a one-size-fits-all, but that would be something we'd have to pay attention to and take a look at.
Okay. I'll hold there on any questions. There may be some more that develop from public comment. So at this time, I'll open public comment for anybody who would like to speak to this item. Please come forward. Welcome, Lena.
Welcome back to work, Mayor and Council. I'm Lena Thomas, business owner on Main Street. It's parklet business I'm here to discuss with you tonight. 7 months and 1 week ago yesterday, construction began on the demo parklet, igniting a long and spirited town discussion. It's good that people have gotten involved, been concerned, and expressed their opinions. That's democracy in action. The 6-month demonstration period for the parklet, though, has ended. The city has outlined 3 basic options available to consider as you move forward. You can decide to remove the demo parklet and discontinue any further parklet discussion. You can direct relocation of the parklet and provide direction to staff regarding parklet policy development, or you can keep the parklet in its current location and provide direction to staff regarding parklet policy development. Which answer would be best for our town? The decision about this small piece of Morro Bay's future rests, council, in your hands. I believe I'm speaking tonight, I'm anointing myself to speak tonight on behalf of over 1,800 petition signers, the majority, I believe, of Main Street businesses, and anybody behind me who's still here at this late hour and would like to raise their hands in urging you to decide that it is not in the best interest of Morro Bay to have parklets at this point in time. Parklets are rapidly becoming a fad, but they were originally developed for major urban areas to discourage the use of cars and encourage the use of public transport. In these big cities, they also provide a small haven to sit and relax in a sea of concrete. In contrast, our small town is surrounded on all sides by beautiful hills, bird rookeries, the bay, and the sea. We are blessed with lots of high-quality public space available in the form of gardens, patios, and courtyards where people can sit and gather. There are numerous outdoor dining options and will continue to be so with or without parklets. There are lots of places to sit and relax overlooking the bay and in Old Town. In Morro Bay, we are able to put people first by providing space for comfort and interaction in a way that big cities cannot. Obviously, if you opt to continue with parklets in Morro Bay, a well-considered plan and process will need to be put in place, one that encourages public input and dialogue, takes the temperature of the business community, deals with issues involving parking, vehicle speed, street congestion, maintenance, site criteria and guidelines, application process and fees. The list goes on. It seems to me that time will be needed to sort all this out, certainly weeks, possibly longer. In the meantime, what happens to the Main Street parklet? I spoke yesterday with Scott Graham. He said, I could quote him with the following suggestion. Even if you decide to keep the parklet where it is in fact a demo parklet. It was slapped together with recycled materials and would need to be redesigned, reinforced, and rebuilt. Why not dismantle it, fairly easy to do, and store it away until you've completed your parklet policy, if you opt for one. This would remove time pressure on council and would allow all of us to relax and get back to business as usual. Thank you.
Thank you, Lena.
Good evening, David Nelson. The whole idea of parklets, it has merit, but where this one is, it doesn't really have merit. If you look, I haven't walked on that side of the street other than going to Lena's shop it's just crowded. It's congested there when you have that thing sticking out in the road. I agreed with the demonstration. We're going to do it for 6 months and see how people like it. Seems to me that 1,800 signatures on a petition you guys should take a little notice of that. These are people that live here and people who really love Morro Bay. I mean, you talk about Pacific Grove. They have much wider sidewalks than we do. I mean, my friend moved his shop, G&T Boots, out of its location because all the diners are out in front of his building taking up a lot of parking places. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it doesn't jive with a business community when you're giving special consideration without having the space. I mean, that's the problem. I mean, if we had more space, I think it's a great idea. I think maybe shut that whole street off if you can and make it a mall. Then you don't have to worry about parklets. Let's make some one-way streets and have traffic move around. You close it for the farmers market, we survive. Maybe that's an answer. I mean, you're just trying to put too much in a small area. The idea is good. I mean, people that are sitting there are enjoying it for sure. I mean, if I could sit around on Main Street and watch people go by, that's pretty fun, but it doesn't make any sense because it's too small of an area. I mean, if you're going to plan something, you really need space to do it. If we have lots that you can go and do it on, that might be a good idea. Like I say, if you're going to close off a street and make a pedestrian mall, maybe that makes sense, but this particular one, it was a nice idea, but I don't think it works, and I don't think the majority of people like it. I mean, like I say, when was the last time you got a petition with 1,800 signatures on it? So we should listen to the people that really are here all the time, and it was an okay idea, but it's a failed idea in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening again, Bill Martini, Morro Bay. Yeah, I think the idea was excellent, as far as a parklet, but when it ends up affecting one business, benefiting like Top Dog, and yet Lena's business has been really affected by it, I think that in itself speaks for itself on that particular location. If you're talking about a parking problem, and the city controls a piece of property across the road where the yogurt shop is, and they have an outdoor area that's perfect for a parklet, it would only make sense to put your parklet not in parking spaces, but put it catty corner. And it just seems like an obvious location for a parklet for that downtown area. I mean, the city has control over that lot, and it solves the problem on the parking spaces, and yet it gives you a parklet in that same location. So that's a thought. And the other thought is, after a 6-month demonstration, I agree, if you're talking possibly up to a year before this may come into effect, the ordinance, then this parklet, I think, has run its course, and it probably should be taken down just because of the business that's being affected. By benefiting one and affecting the other, I think it's time for it to be removed at this point until a permanent ordinance is put in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Anybody else for public comment?
Hi, good evening again. Walter Heath, resident of Morro Bay. I'll try to be additive to this, maybe not reiterate some of the obvious things. But one of the things that kind of occurred to me is that, what would have happened if we had a public process before the demonstration parklet went in? And I think one of the things that would have emerged from a public discussion was that, well, we have, and actually one of the people who opposed the parklet also raised this issue, is that when you're going down Main Street and you're going by Top Dog, before the parklet was there was a real problem in terms of tables and planters and people with dogs on leash and stuff kind of obstructing the public right-of-way. And so there were two options at that point. You could either tell the owner of Top Dog, hey, you're obstructing the public right-of-way, you're going to have to remove those things. Or you could go to the alternative suggestion, which was done, which was the demonstration parklet, which kind of provided seating and yet restored the public right-of-way. So I think, going forward, as we have a discussion about parklets, it'll be great to have a public process because those kinds of things can emerge. And that has never emerged from any of the discussions that I've heard about parklet versus not parklet. And I found it really kind of interesting that I had those conflicting observations from one person who's very vocally against that demonstration parklet, also being very vocally concerned about the public right-of-way and being able to get around on our sidewalks. So I'm hoping that because the way this parklet emerged and the outcome that, having done it without a public process, to be quite frank, I hope a stigma is not associated with future parklets. That would be a shame because I do think there is some value. I think you'll probably find that there are some businesses on the Embarcadero that would really like the parklet, and we may find that in a couple of years that the businesses downtown are clamoring to get them too because they've proven to be so successful on the Embarcadero. So be careful what you wish for, folks. But I do hope that the parklet concept continues, because you can't have enough gathering places in a city. There needs to be, there are different tastes, different likes and dislikes, and I think there needs to be opportunities for gathering for everyone. I mean, look at the Shine, and this, by all accounts, it's the cultural hub of the town, and they have what is effectively, with the outdoor dining and the outdoor seating, you've got a gathering place there. So there is some merit to it. Thanks.
Thanks, Walter. Anybody else?
Betty Winholtz. I'd like to address this from three perspectives. One is from council, a political perspective. One from a statistical perspective. I'll try not to stutter. Being a mathematician, I'm interested in that. And then the other from our community culture perspective. So as an elected official, even if there are 80% of people that are signed the petition that are from out of state or out of town, that still leaves you over 300 people from Morro Bay that signed it and are opposed to it. Now, you don't see 300 people here tonight clamoring to keep it. So I think it's important to think about that. As a politician, as an elected official, what is your community trying to tell you? Another perspective from the council is priorities. Certainly, we've got a wastewater treatment plant, we've got a machinization project, we've got, what else are we doing in planning? Tons of projects. And you want to add a little parklet management thing to Scott and how many people work for him? 1.5. So, I think that's a very legitimate question. Is this really a top priority? From the statistical point of view, or the mathematician in me, I teach or tutor statistics, and there's nothing about either Lena's or Scott's surveys that were random or fair. Certainly, Lena didn't come across as being that. Hers was merely a petition, making a single statement, are you in favor or against? But this stuff, there's nothing random, which means legitimate, about this kind of a survey. It's self-selecting. It doesn't address the core issues. You talked about it being an economic benefit. There was no economics evaluated. It came all back to parking. And your parking map was not the way, and this gets into the culture of Morro Bay, you put the parklet in the center of the wheel and then evaluated the streets that come out from that as spokes. But how do people park in Morro Bay, in downtown Morro Bay? We park all the way up the boulevard, and we park up and down Main Street. So the areas where we do parking were not evaluated. People don't go down to Morro Avenue to park. It's like out of view, out of mind. So don't force feed this parklet on us. Don't keep something that you promised to get rid of in 6 months, particularly if it's going to have to be rebuilt or whatever. It hasn't gone through the process. Take it out, send it to your commissions, let them deal with it, and we'll go talk to them there. But don't force feed this on us and think that this is appropriate for our culture and for where Morro Bay is. Parking is important to us. Being able to get in and out of our stores is important to us, and we really want to support our businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty.
Susan Stewart again. I own the bead store around the corner on Morro Bay Boulevard. Just a couple things, because everybody's been very eloquent. One is, whatever you do, please put the bike rack up on the sidewalk, not where cars back into it. I know maybe nobody reported it, but there have been several times that bikes have been hit by cars backing up. I just worry some kid someday is going to be bending down low to undo his lock and boom, So anyhow, bike racks do not belong on the street. They belong on the sidewalk. So that's number one. Number two, and Betty touched on it, I don't want to, point at any particular business. I don't think any of the businesses on Main Street are doing any better. If this is part of an economic improvement program, what I hear from a lot of those businesses is not a good year so far. I'm not going to relate that to the parklet because, again, you can't do that. But did it enhance that? Probably not. So maybe Susan down the road can take a look at statistics when those numbers come in. I know there are figures available for each business and how they're doing each year. So those are sort of proprietary figures that are available. It might be something to look at. And listen to what these folks are saying. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Anybody else for public comment?
Melody Demerit from Morro Bay, formerly on City Council, so I know what it's like sitting up there listening to us. I also know that there are always plans and consultants that we pay. For example, parking management plan that we paid for when I was on council. That hasn't been ages ago, and Morro Bay hasn't changed remarkably. I don't know why we're having staff running around counting parking places when we already know the problem. Please take the parklet out. Just take the parklet out. Do you understand? You took away public parking spaces, and you have admitted over and over and over, your staff has admitted, it was to enhance a business. It was to provide more outdoor dining. Outdoor dining in Morro Bay, we've got plenty of it, and we have cold weather. So I'm not sure why that's a big concern. But the fact of that parklet, it is an ugly eyesore on Main Street in Morro Bay. It is an ugly eyesore. When I first saw it, I was talking with the city manager, and he was alluding to the idea that we want to look like Pacific Beach or something, and I think that even got brought up tonight. I don't want to look like Pacific Beach. I want to look like Morro Bay. Number two, I went home and I Googled parklet because I didn't know what the heck they're supposed to look like, and I found them in Seattle, New York, Chicago. Just like Lena said, they do not belong in a small town where people come for their better nature. Also, I'd like to put a little plug in for Morro Bay Beautiful since I'm a member and a volunteer with them. It just wasn't right to go around dragging these little flower boxes that were volunteers' stations, and they couldn't find them the next week when they went out to water or to weed or to plant things because the city had simply gone out and just taken that property too. Stuff Morro Bay Beautiful had put in and paid for. So they made the ugliest parklet in the stupidest place, in the wrong city. Take it out. Oh, and by the way, please, no centerline parking, no metered parking in this town, and no angled parking in this town. It's Morro Bay. We like it here.
Anybody else for public comment?
My name is Bernadette Pekarik, and I've been in Morro Bay since about 1957. And as far as the parklet, Mr. Buckingham, maybe you have a good idea on that. But really, it does not belong there. And I was very troubled. I didn't want to come down here and speak. But I threw myself together real quick, got down here, waited for 2 hours to speak. Only because I'm very compassionate towards Coalesce and how this business has been affected. Now, I've been going into Coalesce since the early 80s, and they've been a thriving business. It has affected them, and I'm very sorry about that. And Mr. Heading, you have a business here in Morro Bay, on Morro Bay Boulevard, my dear pharmacist. And how would you like to have a parklet in front of your business that affected you negatively, or any of you? And just think about this. And there has to be other areas. If you really want a parklet, please think about other areas, because Main Street is not the street to have this parklet. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else for public comment?
Mr. Mayor, City Council, Craig Griswold, 830 Monterey Avenue. I live downtown. I walk everywhere in Morro Bay. I don't have a car. And at first I thought the idea was good, but then I thought about the Fresno Mall, how the Fresno Mall sounds like a great idea back in the 60s with fountains and pedestrian areas and sculpture and artwork, but it failed. And whenever you start blocking traffic, I think you have a real problem. And as a customer of Coalesce, I think it's hurting them. I like all the businesses in the downtown. I like Top Dog. My sons think it has the best coffee anywhere, and they live in Washington, D.C. and Hollywood. So I like the businesses. But I think this is hurting one of the last brick and mortar bookstores in the county. And I think we owe it to Coalesce, who provides other services. And you've just spent money on a place that may be vacant, where the visitor center is. That could be a coffee shop with lots of space. And there, as many other people mentioned, there are other alternatives than blocking that. And as a walker, I'm always worried about dogs and leashes. And if I tripped, well, I was a lawyer, but I'm not anymore, I would have to consider who's responsible for me tripping there with all those dogs and people hanging around. They're not the people that are economically productive or useful for Morro Bay. My wife is French, and this isn't the Champs-Élysées. We just don't have that much space. It's just unfortunate. And where are all the people supporting the parklet? Your lawyers sitting here, and an American principle of justice is, if you sleep on your rights, you lose them. So I don't see any support for that parklet, other than the concept. I love the concept of people walking. I'd rather not have any vehicular traffic in all of Morro Bay except for the elderly or handicapped with electric cars, and keep cars out and everybody walk. It's not going to work. Nobody would come. We would shrivel on the vine. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else for public comment?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council. Jane Heath. I am a resident of Morro Bay and happy to say also a business owner on Main Street as of 45 days ago. I just want to make a couple of points. I heard, Lynn is saying that she's representing the 1,800 people who signed her petition. I guess that means that I'm representing those folks who can't be here, that not only think that the parklet is a good idea, but think that the space it's in is a good idea. We had the good fortune this summer to have visitors in our home from the Bay Area, from Arizona, from West Los Angeles, from Chicago. We had an unusual summer in that we had a number of folks come and visit us. Every single one of those people commented that they thought our downtown was charming. That's not always been true. We've had house guests come through our town before and look around and say, what's going on downtown? I mean, the Embarcadero's great, but, your downtown is just, sleepy and not interesting. Part of the thing that attracted our visitors was the parklet. They thought that was a great concept. They loved the idea that there was additional space being given for, for congregating, for being a community. Two people in particular commented they couldn't imagine a better place for a parklet than in front of a coffee shop and a bookstore. Any given day when I'm in that parklet or walking by it, there are 2, 3, half a dozen people sitting there reading books. I mean, real books, not the books I read. I mean, like books that come from bookstores. It's a difficult situation, and I certainly respect the business owners. I understand what it's like to feel that you're being impacted by something that the city has done. But what the demonstration parklet did was courageous, it was initiative, It's the kind of thing we want to see in government, and I would be very sad if, this process put a chilling effect on that kind of ingenuity. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Jane. Anybody else for public comment?
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. I'm Richard Williams. I'm a one-year resident of Morro Bay. The parklet, well, okay, I'm not quite for it and not quite against it. But I think you're on the wrong track. You ought to have something that you can remove conveniently, make it portable, and then you can put it in point A for a while, move it over to point B for a while, and everyone has something. Where if you're going to have a permanent location, well, you might as well have brick and mortar. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else for public comment? Seeing none, I'll close public comment, bring it back to council. Thanks for all the comments and input. And Lena, thank you. From day one, this has all gone in, and you have come to council time and again, very thoughtfully, very courteously. I appreciate your presence and just your thoughtfulness and how you're presenting what your comments are, what your desires are, what your effects are in your business. And so anyway, I just want to say that. Thank you for, I think it's just, it's a great model for all of us as we go through this kind of democracy when we may have criticisms of how things are moving, whether or not we can say too fast, too slow, or maybe not enough input, too much input. Maybe not too much input is one of the things. But at any rate, certainly want to say thanks for the way you've presented everything. So thank you. Sorry for singling you out, but you have been leading the charge on this. But thanks. So with that, I'll pause there and. Noah, would you start us off on your comments?
Sure. After 7 months of build-up and a lot of thought and observation, I think, on everyone's part on this. And in my mind, that's one of the successes of a demonstration is being able to experience an idea and then reflect back on that and ultimately make a decision. So in thinking about this, I tried to set aside my personal opinion about it, which is that I actually really enjoy the parklet, and I think the location's good. I'm anticipating missing seeing people comfortably sitting there with a fairly open sidewalk and public walkway, as it should be, and people enjoying extra sun because of the exposure and a lot of community being established down there. Initially, the idea and the concept of parklets is about additional community gathering spaces, and I've heard different comments about, well, that we have that at Grandma's, or we have that over at Pizza Port, or in some of the backyard gardens that are throughout the downtown. And I'm of the opinion that these gathering spaces are all very important, and we should try to establish more of those, make sure they're safe and so forth. But it's in an intent to create a destination, a place where people think there's a place for them and they can be accepted, and there's different styles and ways that people want to experience. Person that might enjoy Grandma's may not enjoy the parklet that the city demonstrated with, or enjoy Pizza Port. But the accumulation of those creates an opportunity for each different style. So in general, I think there is room for parklets. That's one of the things that I've heard somewhat consistently, and including from Lina and explicitly on your petition, that it's not necessarily the idea of a parklet, but it's this exact location that is the problem. And that's where we saw the 1,800 signatures. And for me personally, I'm in a position at this point to think the demonstration has served its purpose. We need now to back up and really focus on a process that analyzes how a program could be implemented and done with strong community and stakeholder engagement. And I personally think I'm going to miss that parklet, but I would say that we should remove that, clear the air, and refocus on looking at how a program could be put together. I'm not sure that taking another month or so and kicking it to the advisory board and the planning commission is going to be really helpful in the discussion. I think it's time for us to focus on the nuts and bolts of if a parklet program and how. And in that discussion, I will personally be somewhat sensitive to a private business, even though they have invested in a parklet, therefore owning that public space. I think that's going to be something we're going to have to be very careful about, knowing that there's a lot of sensitivity to that already. And I think there's ways we can structure it so it's still inviting and available for someone who just would like to sit down and enjoy that public space for a moment, even if the business took the time and effort to establish it there. I just want to take a quick look at my notes and make sure I didn't miss anything important. Just an important note is I spent a little bit of time downtown just observing, and I've had a couple of the downtown businesses approach me specifically to say that they do like the parklet, and their business is right in that very location, and have said that the parklet's actually helped their exposure. They've had people come into the business who were in the parklet and noticed their business for the first time. And I thought that was really interesting because one case particular, they at first were not in favor of the parklet. It concerned them. It was new. It was kind of startling. So I thought that was an interesting point. The other that Mr. Griswold raised, and I think it's an important one, we have to be really careful about the idea of shutting down existing thoroughfares, because the example in Fresno, the Fresno Mall, I think is an important warning that the intent was to create more open space, more public gathering and flow, but it really didn't work. Now, on the other hand, you have the example of the Mission, downtown San Luis Obispo, which was unheard of and a major battle to close that street, and now you couldn't imagine it in any other way. So that's a much bigger, more complicated decision, and I know we're not quite ready to focus on that within this parklet discussion. I think the idea of a portable parklet, as was suggested in one of the last comments, is really an interesting one and could be a way to go. But I'd like to see some parameters established for a modest parklet program that the community can review and buy into and then ultimately be approved by council.
Great. Thanks. John?
Whew. My goodness gracious, we're finally here. So I took the opportunity to do what I normally do, and that is to learn about parklets from the National Association of City Transportation Officials, NATCTO, Scott, FYI. So your guidelines are right here, by the way. So this started out just really quickly as a LEAP initiative and to hopefully either indicate economic benefit or not. I don't know really how you measure that. And so from a success or failure standpoint, I don't think it's done either. I think it's created great discussion and debate. I only wish our discussion of the budget had had this much input. It would have been great if financially people were this aware of issues in the community that could potentially impact us and have impact over the next 10 years as opposed to something that takes 3 parking spaces away from businesses. So with that, this was never intended to be permanent, as I recall. It was a demonstration project. And last, it was constructed out of inexpensive materials that were not unique to this place, to this business, or to its location. And that was good because it didn't cost us much. But if you look at these great design criteria for parklets that I have, Scott, if you've seen one parklet, you've seen one. And they're all different in a sense. And they all fit the area that they're designed for. So the bottom line of this, and they say the advantages of parklets are that they, number one, increase foot traffic in an area generally. I'm just saying generally. Number two, that they, in general, help the revenue stream for business. Number three, they improve beautification for a city if done correctly. And number four, they improve socialization and viewshed economics. Now, that's an interesting term because that means people can enjoy the beauty of your community if it's done right. And so in thinking about this in detail, I'm not going to read another report. This has been analyzed to the nth degree. We've got analysis paralysis. And I think it's time to move. And I suggest that, or at least my feeling is that, one, like neighborhood compatibility, we need to develop parklet compatibility guidelines. Two, that each design is unique, and when we do, if we decide to come up and use parklets, they'll all be different based upon the entity where it's placed and what business and or area that it's desired to be built. Three, there's got to be some shared cost element developed with a business, if indeed a business is involved. Four, I believe that the maintenance issue should involve both the business owner and the city. Five, I think it's you can have a somewhat standardized design, but if you do go with parklets, I think, again, if you've seen one, you've seen one, and it has to be designed for the specific location in which it is to be located. So where I'm landing, given all of this, is right here. One, I would remove the existing parklet. At this time, I think the demonstration's been done. We've analyzed it. There is no blame on any side. We've had great input. Two, I support the idea of parklets in general. I've seen many of them in large and small cities. I'm not saying we need 100 of them. We may need 1, 2, 5, 10. I don't know. But I think they could be beneficial to our community. But prior to that, like neighborhood compatibility guidelines, we need parklet compatibility guidelines in place before we move forward with any more development of parklets. I would also say this may not be, from a timing standpoint, a priority for the city. However, I'd like to not see this put off for too long, because I do believe there could be benefit from it. And after all of that's done, I believe it should be brought back to council for further input from the community. And then on a business-by-business, place-by-place basis, if indeed it's approved, decisions can be made to either implement or not implement parklets. And so, thank you. And thanks for those of you that wrote. Also, I always like to acknowledge people that write in and send mail or emails. Thank you for that. We do look at those, and I appreciate those. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Matt?
One thing that's become clear over the last 5-10 years in terms of downtown revitalization, and we've been talking about it, Dave's starting to talk about it, in terms of tying the Embarcadero, getting people, and not necessarily tourists, to get into our downtown area. And as Walter was bringing up, and it's not just Walter bringing up, Walter Heath here in his commentary, there's a lot of people going, I like this pedestrian-friendly downtown. And now it's not revitalized all the way, but however, walking around, because once you go above 1 or 2 blocks above Main Street, you start to lose seating. It doesn't become very sit and rest comfortable for the pedestrian. And I do a lot of walking around town. You might go up to City Park, there's a little bit, but however, this parklet was a good way of getting people to sit enjoy, whether or not it's a book, coffee, or water, or just conversation. It was good, but it was a demonstration. And so this demonstration, I think, is tied to downtown revitalization. And the demonstration is over, and I agree with John and Noah, is that, if we're going to go to Parks and Rec, fine. We go to planning, fine. But we've wasted, there's been a lot of energy on this project, positive and negative, and a lot of that energy is going out the door in terms of necessarily moving the city forward on whatever front, or revitalizing the city on whatever front. I'm trying to put a positive spin on this, and from that angle, I'd love to see parklets, a couple throughout the city. I mean, even on the Embarcadero, sometime even in downtown. But this one, it's opened the dialogue. All right, and so putting a positive spin on it, it has. And so even for those folks out there who say you haven't liked parklets, let's think constructively about this and what it can do moving forward holistically for this area to promote not just the feel of Morro Bay, but and also enhancing business. So with that. It was a demonstration parklet. I approve of parklet. I think what Scott was talking about earlier in terms of the pavement, the parking management plan, Melody, you brought up the one done in 2008. I mean, and I realized, Scott, in your world, you can't put too much more on your plate before it breaks. Not even gets overfilled before it breaks. But somehow, if we can tie that together, because that was integral to this whole thing, was that parking on that slice of Main Street, but then looking at the whole downtown area. And I know, Dave, you and I have talked about it a number of times, and through council, this has been brought up a lot. Enhancing that downtown. This demonstration parklet, if nothing else, has really opened that dialogue box. And there's a lot of folks out here in the audience and up here. We've talked about different ways, not just parklets, but different things to be done. So with that, that's what I have to say.
Great. Christine?
Thanks. Great input from everyone. I think we're going down the same road on this. We're going to all be sitting in the same parklet, potentially. Positives for this experience. We are finally focusing on supporting our downtown businesses. I don't know how many times before I was elected and since I've been on here that I've heard feedback that we don't care about downtown. The city doesn't care. People only care about the Embarcadero. They only care about tourists. But like it or not, positive or negative, we've all been over the last 7 months focusing on downtown. I don't think there's anybody in the whole city who doesn't know we have a coffee shop next to an independent bookseller. And for me, that's great, because not every city has it, and we do. And we're celebrating what we have. I hope it also encourages not just our visitors. They know what's here. They have time. They're on vacation. They can wander the streets. But the rest of us as residents, we're going one direction and the next and the next. We sometimes forget what we have downtown. So I hope this process, once the parklet is removed, which I do support, people will feel more comfortable to go back downtown and go into Coalesce and go into Top Dog and go across the street to Eclectique and go to the bike shop and get a foot massage. I'm leaving out others, I know, but the ones that are currently right around the parklet, and they'll get back to going downtown. Because I do think that's part of the impact is when you try something new, you have positive and you have negative responses. So I hope that once we take out the parklet, two things I hope happen. I hope everybody floods back downtown because it feels a little bit more comfortable, that you're not making someone at the bookshop angry because you're sitting at the parklet, or you're not going in to get a coffee and then going to the bookstore. I mean, I know it sounds petty, but I think that people are sensitive and in our town do truly love the nature of our downtown. So I don't think people do want to hurt anyone's feelings if one person loves it and someone else doesn't like it. I just think there's a vibe there that I didn't expect, but it's emerged, and that's human nature. So what I'm hoping is, number one, we get back to celebrating downtown, and then number two, we don't lose the idea that trying something new can be a positive thing, even if we don't like it at the end. So you heard that echoed in some of the public comment. So my first, and what the other council members have said, so focus on supporting our businesses, I think was long overdue, and now we're all cheerleaders for downtown, I certainly hope. Two, supporting innovation and thinking creatively. It's okay to innovate and to try something, as long as you say when it's not working, you admit it's not working. And that's perfectly fine. We all do that in every other way of our lives. So there would be nothing to expect that we should linger in anger or be upset at staff or direct something towards stupid council. There'll be other stupid things we'll do. So at least for now, I think that we can agree that perhaps this wasn't exactly the spark to increase our economic development downtown in some ways, but it was certainly an effort that was brought out in good faith to do something about our downtown, to increase our sales tax revenue, to then support overall city services. So I think certainly let's get our residents downtown and get us looking around again at what existing businesses we do have, because that's the number one thing on economic development is to support your existing businesses. And many of you have brick and mortar rents to make, and we need to get out there and help you make that rent and support you so that you're here. Direct feedback from the public is another benefit on an innovative idea. Now we know how people feel, so please keep coming out. Don't just come out when you're mad, come out when you're happy, come out when you're kind of in the middle. But it's good to hear direct feedback from the public on a larger aspect of our LEAP program. So it was good to see people come out. Also, it shows that there's a great deal of public support for the city's efforts to, again, finally focus on parking downtown. 2008 study, money was spent. The study wasn't fully explored again. We haven't revisited it. It makes sense to go back and look at it. I hear everyone talking about parking. Let's get back to business and focus on parking, which we will do in the next month or two. Challenges, of course. Not everyone supports the location of the pilot parklet. It's challenging for me to hear even lukewarm response, let alone full-on opposition from folks who have a brick and mortar investment in that block. So it's been a challenge to celebrate that in some ways because I know that there's been opposition. And then perhaps other locations were better that weren't chosen, So anyway, those are some challenges. I led with the positives because I think overall we've learned a lot about our community, and we've also, I would agree, that we've had a very positive role model in the way Lynna Thomas has presented her opposition, and I really appreciate that. And I think that it has been a good role model for all of us, and certainly I hope that our feedback back to Lynna has also been as respectful. So I think in the conclusion, it's time to say farewell to our pilot project, celebrate the democratic process, be comfortable with saying we tried something, but it didn't exactly have the outcome we hoped for, and move on to our next strategy to support small business in our community. So I would support removing the parklet and then also rolling in a parklet discussion to parking in general. Let's have the parking discussion perhaps before we spin out the parklet discussion. That would be my sense. Thanks, and thanks for everyone to stay this late.
Thanks, Christine. Just want to say thanks for everyone as well. Noah, thanks for starting us off. One comment that resonated with me was, I don't think we need to send this to our Planning Commission and Rec and Park. I agree. I think that was a great start for us because I think we, obviously, the way the conversation's going, we can take care of it right here. Also, make some comment. I'm making some comments on my colleagues on council here. Thanks. I'll just take advantage of that. But great comments by all. Some comments about does council do stupid things? I think to some degree we heard from our public comment about being courageous. And I think we need to look at it that way because oftentimes it's like, do we need to do that? And it goes back to something I said earlier. Are we moving too fast, or are we not taking enough time to get input on what decisions we make? So there were a lot of lessons here. The lessons on actually we can get something put in pretty quickly, and then the other lesson was, we'd like to take a little bit more time and having some say in how we put that in. So overall, we've had great input from folks. It was a demonstration parklet. I think need to recognize our staff. It was brought up. It was like, hey, yeah, we can do this. Our maintenance guys were out there, pounding nails and putting that together. It was energetic for them. It was energetic for a lot of people in the community when it was going in. And maybe a little bit cautious from some, and of course the sparks may have ignited throughout the process, which we've all been talking about. But I am too in support of removing the project. It served its time, its purpose. Recognizing that, Christine, you said it as well. There's for quite a long time been conversation about whether or not the city's focusing on the downtown or the waterfront or North Main Street, North Morro Bay. Look what we just put in a few months ago. We put in a bridge across Morro Creek to kind of connect people, right? So these are little steps that were big steps actually that we're putting together as a city, and so there's those things out there, and I think there's always an opportunity for more, but I think there's is a great opportunity to focus on downtown, and I would. I'm also, as I said, in support of removing the parklet at this time. I think in some comments about we're not Pacific Grove, I think, and compared to that, I just want to speak to a couple of analyses on there. I think Pacific Grove was like 8,000 people, and I actually went down and looked at their parklet that they put in, and busier street than Main Street, done totally by the business owner, different program, longer process, but every city has their different success stories, and we've gone through our evaluation, and I think we have an opportunity to go forward. I would like to revisit the priority part of this, and that is considering we started this out as a LEAP program, and we've worked to set goals, and we want to be cognizant of those priorities. I think we've had conversation about linking the parklet to parking, and I think there's the opportunity to linking the parklet to a downtown specific plan, which is on our goals. And so perhaps we can revisit that parking and downtown specific plan evaluation as we're doing that with the knowledge gained by a parklet, because when we go into evaluating our parking situation, what the downtown specific plan may look like, it may take other things into consideration. Parklets for one, outdoor spaces another. So I think those are opportunities that we can look for there. So I'm kind of cautious about going down the path of pursuing a parklet program at this point, simply because we do have other priorities. And as I was talking or discussing earlier, we're talking about design guidelines for 9 months, and I'm thinking it would probably take a little bit longer than that. Not that we're in a rush to do it by any means, because we want to be very thorough and thoughtful. But if it's worthwhile, taking a pause with the inclusion of what we've learned from parklets while we pursue parking and a downtown specific plan. And maybe as we gain knowledge with that, we would, come back and say, we've actually got more comments from, business owners that are actively energetic about, hey, we'd like to pursue a parklet. And, maybe that's more the grassroots type of start that we need. Those are my comments, and didn't know if we want to continue some. I think the overall direction here is we're going to remove the parklet, because we've all been clear on that. I think the other conversation we need is where we go from here, and we've had kind of mixed conversations. So maybe we can wrap that up. And Noah, you're kind of giving me the nod, and you have some comments. So
well, I'd like to make a motion. I think it might summarize what you just described, and I think there's going to be support for that. So I'll move that we direct staff to remove the demonstration parklet, and that our planning commission and staff strategize and continue the discussion on parklets in context with the parking management plan and the downtown specific plan update.
I'll second that for discussion.
Great. We have a motion by Noah, a second by Christine. Discussion? Christine?
That sounds like a great plan. I think it wraps it all up for me. I can't add it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm comfortable.
Okay, thanks. Matt? Good. John?
Just a curious question. Let's say you had a business owner, not Coalesce, but another, that came and absolutely loved the idea and desired to have a parklet built in front of their business. At this point in time, what would be our position, posture on that? And no, in front of the pharmacy, Bernadette, no, that's not what I was speaking of. So, but thank you for asking. No.
It would make those long waits
nothing
endurable,
to do with
though.
parklets.
But see, if but everybody has to wait for their prescription. It'd be perfect.
I don't have to wait very long in my store, that's for sure. I'd have to serve coffee. So I would just open that up just as a general question. In the interim, no guidelines, nothing, would it be totally denied? Because there are some out there, I know, that would like to see a parklet in front of their business.
Point taken. Considering the motion on the floor, we can go ahead and take a vote on that. Unless you want to restate your motion, but I guess I'd move to pursue the motion. And if we need more discussion on, hey, what if somebody approaches us? I kind of feel as though if we had an outpouring support and interest in pursuing that, then council could respond as we have on many things, including a stop sign on Pacific and Main. So, I don't think it precludes us from doing that. It just sets the direction, basically, in the content of the way we've deliberated in this item. Those are my comments.
If I could comment on it, I think we've established a demonstration and an experience to learn about parklets. And at this point, the outcry is, if we're going to allow further parklet installations, we need at least a program and a public process of reviewing that program and then approving it before anything else is installed. So I probably should have been clearer about that no additional parklets will be installed until there's an approved program or additional action by the city council. I personally felt like it was probably inherent in that motion to staff, but if staff would prefer we are clearer about that, probably wouldn't be a bad thing.
Assuming your motion passes, then staff is not going to expend any time on parklet programs until the parking program is deliberated and you make decisions on that, and potentially a downtown waterfront specific plan.
And I think in your question if there was the need, if there was an interest to pursue parklets, and I think part of the discussion here through this is through the comments of whether or not we have adequate parking or we don't have adequate parking. So I think part of the discussion we made was, let's dovetail the parking issue in there so we can so we have a little bit stronger basis to move forward on a parklet. So I guess that would maybe be the response in which, to your question, if someone comes forward and says, hey, I'm interested in a parklet, well, we're going to pursue some more evaluation of our parking, and we'd be welcoming input on both parking and our downtown specific plan.
I would have said not at present until the guidelines and our decision is made. And that's why I asked specifically, because there may well be some coming. I wasn't being a proponent of that. And so I could support it, and your clarification is helpful, simply because of the fact that you may have some that do come forward. So thank you for that.
Yeah, great discussion.
Call the question.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carries 5-0. Thanks again for everybody turning out. And now we'll move on to item D4. Item D4 is a Morro Bay strategic plan and budgeting framework, and that Mr. Buckingham.
1 second. We need to thank you so much.
Y'all are missing the strategic budget planning discussion.
Okay, Mayor, City Council. The purpose of this discussion or presentation is to gain your direction and approval of a strategic planning framework for the City of Morro Bay. A little background, Council FY16 Objective 10C directs the staff to, quote, research and bring to Council for adoption a strategic planning framework for the City of Morro Bay. Staff recommends that the Council approve the strategic planning framework presented in the staff report and direct staff to bring a resolution to Council adopting this framework for future strategic planning in the City. Alternatively, the Council could continue as we are with no defined process for strategic planning. A couple points of background. First, the City does not have any process that describes how we approach strategic planning, goal setting, but set the budget or other objectives for staff, or tie these things to the annual budget cycle. Over in the past, the city has used various approaches, including goal setting on an annual basis, a biennial basis, a less frequent basis, to help direct staff in the general improvement of the city. In December and January of this past winter, the City Council directed and then conducted a series of goal-setting workshops that affirmed our existing goals and provided staff a clear set of annual objectives associated with each goal to complete in fiscal year 15-16. Staff and council, following a management best practice, used those FY16 objectives to inform the FY16 annual budget. The city our current status is we have an approved set of FY15-16 goals. They expire in June of 2016, along with the current adopted budget that expires at the same time. One quick note on planning, strategic planning versus a strategic plan. This proposal is for a strategic planning framework, not a full strategic plan. Good businesses and sometimes public entities write strategic plans, but in our case, as with many cities, first the city's general plan and local coastal plan, which, as you know, are currently undergoing revision, should provide the overall strategic direction for the city. Other strategic plans, such as the economic development plan that's being written hopefully this fall and winter, and the proposed downtown specific plan or downtown waterfront plan, those things also provide strategic planning in discrete areas. When the general plan is complete, and after 2 or 3 years of following this model, the city might then consider writing a 10-year strategic plan if it's deemed important at that time, but it is likely, as with many cities, that the general plan, local coastal plan, and other core plans will really suffice as a strategic plan, but not a strategic planning framework, how we do goals and set objectives each year. A few definitions. The city mission statement is a council-approved statement that describes the basic or essential tasks that a city must provide. A city mission statement might begin something like, the City of Morro Bay provides public safety, recreation, and other key municipal services in order to XYZ. And in the months ahead, we anticipate that with the GPAC, the General Plan Advisory Committee, and then we'll eventually bring to council a set of vision, values, and mission statement for the city for you to consider updating or revising our mission statement. Core city tasks, those are the things that a city should do well every day. Public safety is one that comes to mind. Maintaining infrastructure is another good one. So a core city task might be maintain infrastructure. Those core city tasks should likely be reflected in our mission statement. Those are essential tasks, things we must do to be basically effective. City goals, however, are general things that we want to accomplish over a longer term period, 4 to 6 years. Often in business, it's 5 to 7 years for goals. That's usually a longer term period because they're big enough and broad enough that they cannot be accomplished in a single year or in 2 years. A great example of a goal would be improve streets. That's our goal number 2. So while a city core task is to maintain infrastructure, if our streets are in a condition like ours are, then we might have a goal that says improve streets. And then budget or program objectives, these are specific, discrete, medium-term 1 to 2 year objectives that support a more general goal. They are feasible and they're achievable if they are appropriately resourced, usually time and money, and they can be directly budgeted against. An example of a budget objective relating to a goal of improved streets could be to repave 10% of the streets in fiscal year 16-17. So those are a few key definitions. I wanted to sort of hit that mission statement, core city tasks, and then the goals and objectives. a comment on biennial budgeting here. Staff considered recommending moving to a biennial or 2-year budget as part of this process. On review, staff recommends that the city stick with our annual budgeting process for the next couple to few years as we solidify our budgeting process, as we seek to provide additional transparency in that process, as we work to incorporate more resident input, and as we work through the proposed strategic planning process. We can then reconsider biennial budgeting in a few years. Approval of this item would therefore satisfy the part of Council Objective 5A budget process, which includes a requirement to, quote, consider biennial budgeting. As noted above, staff recommends that we maintain our current annual budgeting process for 2 to 3 years and consider biennial budgeting at that point. Another note, management partners did not strongly recommend. In fact, one part of management partners recommended against, and other members of management partners said, well, biennial budgeting is not all that bad. But there was not a strong recommendation from management partners that said, you really should do this. And so combined with the other things, we recommend that we take a pause for a couple years on biennial budgeting. Okay, so here is the strategic planning and budgeting framework that we recommend that you consider and approve. So the little stars up at top represent elections, if they're red, represent goal-setting sessions, as we did in January and February of this year in the lavender, and then represent the budgeting process that we all walked through really in May and June with the council. And then in the bars before you, what this framework envisions is that it's important to note that these things are tied to the council election process. And so when a new council is seated in December, normally immediately following in January, February, they will go through a goal or objective setting process. Every 4 years, the council would consider 4-year goals and set 4-year goals for the city. And then every other year, they would, as you see in the sort of lavender bar there, the council, immediately following every election, would refine the objectives underneath those goals and set new 2-year objectives. And then under that, those 2-year objectives are supported by 1-year budgets, and then the entire process is underpinned really by a 10-year budget forecast. So what this does is first, it ties this process to the election process. It extends the period in which city goals remain as a primary city goal. So, for example, it is very difficult to improve streets in a year or in 2 years, but focusing on improving streets over a 4-year or an 8-year process is that's the time period when an entity like a city could reasonably accomplish a significant goal, such as build a water treatment facility or improve streets, or some of the other goals that we have. Okay, so if you look at this, if you accept this as a good model for strategic planning and budgeting, and that is to set goals for 4 years, and then every other year, with a new council, to set the objectives for the next 2 years, and then really to be able to weight those objectives every year with the budget. If you like that idea, then which staff recommends, then we need to figure out how to get onto this, because we're a little bit cattywampus right now based on when our current goals or objectives expire in summer of 2016 and when the next election is in November of 2016. So we really need to bridge a 1-year gap in order to get onto this timeline. So in order to bridge that gap, that process would begin here, as you see, with the council elections in 2016. The city currently has approved goals and objectives that expire in June of 16, and the adopted budget runs through June of 16 as well. So there's that gap in there. To bridge the gap, staff recommends that the council conduct a goal affirmation and FY 16-17 objective setting process this coming January and February, nearly identical to the process that we used last January and February. What we would likely do is sort of revise and extend the goals for another year until we do a full-up goal-setting revision and or reconsideration, and identify one-year objectives for the budget year 2016-17. That will allow the staff and the council to further refine this process before beginning the process with a new council in December of 16. And it'll also extend the city's goals and set new objectives for that additional year that we need to sort of bridge the gap. So here's what that looks like. We're currently out in the middle of 2015 in the dark purple bar with a set of objectives that are in place, and with the dark blue bar with a one-year budget that's in place. We recommend that we come together in January and February of this coming year to really to affirm the goals, to set one-year objectives, and to set a one-year budget. And then, beginning after the 2016 election, we would be on the full process in which every 4 years the council would have an extended goal-setting session in which we actually looked at the goals that are in place and considered changing the goals if they've been accomplished. And then every other year, with a synchronized with council elections, each new council would set 2-year objectives, really the objectives that those council members bring to the table following their election, and the things that they think are most important in order to satisfy the city's goals. So the way ahead, it would be that we've already done the council goal setting in January and February of 15. That's complete. The budget process is complete from May and June of 15. The next step would be in January and February of 16. Council would do goal setting, again, nearly identical to what you did last January and February. And that would affirm the existing goals and set city objectives for the period 1 July 16 to 30 June 17. And then go through the normal budget process, and then starting in November of 16 with the with the November 16 elections, in December, January, and February of that year, council would do goal setting to develop a new set of 4-year city goals and to set 2-year city objectives for the coming 2 years. So, conclusion: the city does not have any approved routine planning process that is linked with the established budgeting process, and we should have a process that we know that we are going to execute. The proposed planning and budgeting framework provides a process for developing 4-year goals, 2-year city objectives that are linked to the budget process and synchronized with council elections. Should the City Council approve this framework, staff will develop a short planning and budgeting white paper, a policy, and bring it to you for adoption as a city policy, really enshrining this in a short document with one of these slides that says, here's how we're going to do strategic planning, or here's our strategic planning framework with the normal timelines and time horizons. So recommendation is that the council approve the strategic planning framework presented in concept at this meeting, and direct staff to develop a short planning framework policy that's based on this presentation, on the staff report, on any direction you give now, and then that would come back to you for adoption by resolution at a future council meeting.
Great, Mr. Buckingham. Thank you. And with that, we'll start off with questions for staff before we move on to public comment and come back to council for deliberation. So, Matt, would you like to start us off? No questions? Christine?
Just a quick question. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'll get into that at the comment period. So when you, just to confirm with me, so you go through all of this, creating the policy, and then exactly where will it be? It'll be in our policies and procedures? Will it end up going into, like, how deep will it be into our system so that
That's a great question. I'd
Yeah.
love some direction on that if you care to give it, or we'll think it through and give you a proposal.
Okay, 'cause I'm thinking, I asked the question because going through our budget policies and renewing things and rewording things to ensure that we had consistency year after year. I think that's the goal of this process. So I'd want to make sure when we create the policy that it's appropriate so that future councils can look to it for guidance, whatever their goals may be, but that the process remains intact.
I agree. And things that are adopted by resolution sort of at a one-time basis tend to fade into the past. So there's might be good reason to include this in some other document that is, those resolutions are still powerful and hold, but they're just easier to forget if they're 15 years old, but they're much easier to remember and follow if they're, for example, included in the council policies and procedures that say, here's when we do these various things.
Right, much like we have our meeting schedule laid
Right.
out, where our meeting schedule goes as deep into that. If we were to change our meeting schedule, we'd have to change our policy on that. We can't just tomorrow decide to meet on Mondays, for example. So something that would take some action in public to change. And that would be a recommendation that you'll bring back to us.
Yes, and that's why we laid this out and said to adopt a policy.
Gotcha.
A policy to be adopted by resolution.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's my only question.
Thanks, Christine. John?
Thanks, Dave. You and I talked about this in some detail a while back, and in my experience, the strategic plan is really the plan that drives both the capital budget and the operating budget. And a good, solid strategic plan really leads to a really good, solid spending plan. And the other thing that I hear consistently with regards to this community and many communities is we have things like a North Morro Bay plan, an economic development plan, a downtown plan, a harbor plan, a general plan update, an LCP update. You see where I'm going with this, and to me, that's disparate planning that could lead to a dysfunctional planning process. I'm not saying that that's what this is, but the overriding thing has to be, in my mind, a master community plan that fits all of these elements. And so I guess what I want to make sure is that there is a way to incorporate what other 20 documents might be on the shelf and our plans that we're eventually going to look at or update fit into this process, and that we somehow develop that into a master community plan. That's point one. And then point two is that when we do objectives, goals first, then objectives, I totally understand the difference between the two. I'm very much used to seeing action plans associated with the objectives that have definable metrics that can be used as measurable entities that staff could bring back on a routine basis for us to follow our progress on the plan. Would that be something that you would incorporate into that process or this process?
On your first point, I think actually you and I may suffer from the same problem in one sense, that we have this thing called a general plan and a master and a waterfront plan, and those are Scott kind of plans more than they are business plans.
Right.
And so I'm more used to that strategic planning process, which is more like a business plan. And those things, we tend to get almost a little bit sidetracked by them and think that they are the strategic plan. So Scott could talk more probably about how all those things nest together underneath the general plan. But we probably don't want him to do that. But on your second point, I also am very comfortable with the idea of action plans associated with each objective. In fact, soon after the goal setting session, I drafted one use as an example for the staff. And then when I realized that there were 73 objectives out there, and with all the other things that we were doing at the time, we took a little bit less of a formal process on those action plans, because the time just to develop an action plan for some of those was going to be significant.
And I just say I do not expect that for this year, nor would I even in the short term expect it, but I would think the goal would be for us to get to a much lower number of objectives/goals and then definable action plans.
I agree. That's what I was going to say. So we didn't get there this year. A couple things going on. I hope to, as we start through this process, and another good reason to have this additional 1 year sort of extension of the current goals and objectives as we work onto this process, so that we can start to build those action plans supporting each objective.
So I guess the point, the first discussion I know is right now philosophical, but I don't want to lose the importance down the line, and I do understand the fact that this is an iterative process that's moving over time, but without a master framework to incorporate those pieces, you have things happening in a very fragmented fashion that may or may not contribute to the overall direction that you want to go in a community. So.
Mm-hmm.
Noah?
Yeah, thank you. And I think what we've laid out here is actually really interesting and strives for consistency. And I think this is coherent if you were to lay it out in an isolated situation and a very consistent situation as far as steadiness of the leadership. But that's just not the case with democracy and with a city council that has the potential to turn over every 2 years. So I think this is something that's important for us to adopt, and starts to lay out an intention and a process forward. I'm a little concerned with the idea of believing that a 4-year goal cycle is going to hold up, just because the way elections run and the way there's potential for turnover. We need to build in the revisitation and review and affirmation of these goals every year, just as we did this year with our 2-year goals from the previous, and make that space for the potential to change it. So otherwise, I think this whole concept would just get scrapped during the next election. So I think you had recognized that as you were laying this out, that annually all of this is up for revisitation, whether it's by the council or at least, and then the community, and there will be the intent to try to build out to longer term goals. But I just want to know that you plan on, with the policy, having that annual revisitation, even of those 4-year goals, say if that's the direction we're going.
So I think you could at least get to 2-year goals and 2-year objectives within a council's term.
That's true.
And there is a benefit to any organization in having stability in its planning, so that you can put down markers and build consensus in a community and try to work towards certain goals to achieve. That's probably a good reason also to have broadly accepted goals, and perhaps fewer than 10, to really what does the whole community think that we really need to focus on. So I would be hopeful that every council would see the benefit of having long-term goals, and work toward that, even if there's a massive change at election and the next council scraps those, that when that council sits, they could see the benefit of having long-term goals too. Because for an organization, for any organization, it's just really hard to improve streets in a 2-year period.
I agree completely, but I want to make sure that we're crafting into this policy the space to revisit that and affirm those goals as we did this year.
Yeah, so I think it's there. I think if you establish 4-year goals, then within every council, a council is going to be able to identify and give direction to the staff, the objectives underneath those goals for in a 2-year period, and then every single year in the budget process, one benefit of not doing a biennial budget, every single year during the budget process to really revisit those and weight those. And say, actually, that objective, you know what, we're not going to fund that one this year because it didn't turn out like we wanted, or we think that there's another objective that's more important. As in any organization, the real issue is where the money is. And so you've got an annual budget, which is the first part of the key resource that what you would do is prioritize resources. You have a 1-year budget. You get to deal with that every year, and you get to tell me what to prioritize, which is the other thing is staff time. So the two big resources out there are time and money, and you're revisiting those every year.
Good. I wanted to make sure of that.
Okay, so just since we're still on questions and we still have to get to public comment, I just want to just one quick question for you, and then we'll get to public comment. Great framework. I agree with that. But as from a public perspective, and just for a little bit more for information on this, the goal-setting process this is just a framework. We're not looking at the goal-setting process, which includes public workshops, because they are city goals. They are developed through our public input and our community input, and that's that. Even though it doesn't spell it out in here, but I think as we look at it and we talk about city goals, that's still part of the process. It may not be. That's kind of the nuts and bolts. This is the framework that we're discussing right now. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thanks. I just want to leave it at that, and then go into public comment. For anybody who'd like to speak to this item, please come forward. Seeing none, bring it back to council, and we'll have discussion. Start off with a little bit comments on this as well. As proposed, I like it. I think we did have a little bit of this conversation during our budget workshop, and the way it's tied to the election cycle. The overall presentation of this, it's a framework for our staff and for City Council. As first coming into office as an elected, there wasn't, I had to ask, okay, so we need to set city goals. And there really wasn't an established process other than, okay, we notice a meeting and we go through workshops and we do that. And previous council at the time hadn't set goals. They were just, they had set a budget, and there was, I guess, objectives that went along with that. So I think it's very advantageous to have a framework as proposed. As a new council comes in, obviously council majority can make different decisions, but no different than this last process that we went through when we were affirming things. I think to your point, paving streets, overlying goal, 4 years, 2 years, wastewater treatment plant, another large goal. Things can still be refined as, councils come and go, but this is a framework that, and to the question that Christine had, I've got some comments on that as well. Where does this go? And I think we still have a study session with our finance committee at some point where we're going to talk about objectives and goals for that. Our management partners report identified a plethora of financial review, and our finance committee would be great for that. This document here would be great in our budget policy. In fact, it'd probably be one of the first pages as I see it, because that kind of identifies the whole framework in which we're discussing, along with the rest of the budget policies. But I think that's an opportunity for our finance committee to evaluate budget policies, compile maybe a budget policy handbook. Could also be available electronically, other than searching for one at a time. So those are my comments on that. I'm supportive of the way it's laid out. But just wanted to reiterate for the viewing public, as we go through goal setting, the nuts and bolts of having a workshop, outreach, how we survey the public in getting input on what our goal should be is a different process. This just lays out that, hey, it makes sense that we can set 4-year goals, 2-year objectives, 1-year objectives tied with the budget, et cetera. Those are my comments there. As in regard to the 2-year budget, I think there's an opportunity. I understand your staff's recommendation on that. I think there's also an opportunity as we get into our finance committee helping us evaluate things. That 2-year budget, that's a great opportunity for them. We can go through a lot of budget policy review, and they can give us great evaluation and recommendation on, is a 2-year budget appropriate for us, or is a 1-year budget appropriate for us? And so those are my comments there. I'll look to my left for other discussion. Matt, if you want to make some comments.
Sure. I think this whole framework is great. It can provide continuity to staff and residents who want to see the planning process, but also to council. Even with the election cycle, as Noah's bringing up, even when people bring different plans or objectives or visions, they can look at that continuity, the 10-year budget forecast. They can see the past going forward. So even if they want to change it, there's room within the 1-year budget, 2-year objectives, 4-year goals to do that. And so that there's room for the political machinations to manifest. And then also the way that this ties the continuity to the 10-year budget forecast that someone can look back on, the new incoming council, and then go, and they can be strategic about their planning, and then staff therefore can be. So I think it's a good framework. Thank you.
Christine?
I absolutely agree. I think that, Matt, you make a lot of common sense in what you're saying. I think this makes a lot of common sense for us to have. I wanted to say, I think we should say hooray, we're taking it seriously, that long-term planning is important to the city of Morro Bay. I think that long-term goals help build commonality among council members to identify a common shared responsibility based on the public input that is provided, and then for Citizens Council and city staff to have a focus on the big items we want to accomplish, which in many cases are much easier to agree on than a smaller, particular, factionalized item. So I think repair our streets is something that just about everyone who could possibly be elected in the future would share as a common goal. Really, for the most part. That's almost. Depends, yeah. But there are very few streets that are not going to need repair. But I think it's essential for us to have a strategic planning framework. And this is going to come back to us again. I like the direction it's heading. I agree 4-year goals do give us a chance to look further afield, which I think is good for communities. And I think there's still plenty of flexibility within the system. And, politically, things can always be changed. Really almost anything can be brought forward and readjusted if it needs to be so. So I think that we're being very honest and open about how things are processed. I think clearly every 2 years things change. Sometimes they change more radically than others, but every 2 years you have an election. So I think it makes sense to match it to that. I am still a proponent for a 2-year budget. I've been advocating for that for a while. So I do want to say that I would like to have a little bit more input on that, perhaps from our finance committee. So I guess timing-wise, do you think this will be something we can discuss at our joint meeting? I saw that there was an email floating around for dates for us to have a joint meeting. Mm-hmm. Could this maybe be something we put on that agenda?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
But overall, I'm very appreciative to see something like this, and thank you for the work on it, Mr. Buckingham. And I think it'll set a course for future councils that will be very helpful for them. It doesn't tie them to any one goal. It just ties them to making sure they have a strong process. Thanks.
Thanks, Christine. John?
So I just want to say thanks for putting a framework to it and moving it to the next step. hopefully soon we can get to action plans, and if that's not this year, then maybe next year. But I would be supportive of this process, so thanks.
Noah?
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's very important for the long term to try to maintain consistency and achieve our goals and so forth. I just brought up my questions earlier because I do think it's important to have explicitly written into the policy an annual revisitation and check-in, because without that, this is going to get thrown out the window as soon as the new council is elected. So with that, I think it's an excellent document. It's going to help lead the way forward.
So I just want to ask you a question about that. So I understand and appreciate the annual visit. We're going to create a policy that's part of our budget policy, let's say handbook or whatever you want to call it at this point, at this late hour. So if we have a budget policy handbook, and this is our budget policy framework as we move forward, why would it not be used every single year? I mean, I just want to, not quite sure why we would lose this if we're establishing a policy.
Where I got concerned was looking at the concept of 4-year goals, carrying through and being consistent without the opportunity to actually check in every year on those goals, just as we did this year. We're going to revisit that, check in, make sure there's no outstanding concerns. Do we need to change course on any of these larger goals? Well, we need that built in as well. I think implicitly with a 1-year budget, you're going to be doing this annually. But if the expectation is you'll never touch those 4-year goals, I just don't think that's realistic. So somewhere in that policy and framework, recognizing what we did this year was effective and can carry on.
Okay, thanks. Got it. John?
Just a quick comment. So if a 4-year goal is to build a wastewater treatment plant, each year you're going to have new objectives associated with that. I think that's what Noah may be referring to, and I absolutely agree that that has to be done on an annual basis. So that's simplistic to me, and I hope that, yeah. Okay.
That pretty much summarizes it. Yep. But I also, the wastewater treatment plant's maybe not the best example, but that there could be a cause to change that goal if there was enough support from the council, and we shouldn't expect that there wouldn't be that potential out there.
Okay. All right, ready for a motion on this. Just would make a motion to approve staff recommendation on the Morro-Bay strategic planning and budgeting framework. I have a second by Christine. Noah, are we clear on that, or did you feel as though we needed to add the language where it's annually reviewed?
You're going to get another take at this when you adopt the policy.
It's more of a micromanaging critique on the words that come back to us.
Okay.
So I think staff heard me.
Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carries 5-0. All right, moving on to D5. And how about if we just take a motion to move beyond 11 o'clock tonight and get through the rest of the agenda? I'd make a motion to move past 11 o'clock. Do I get a second?
I always do it. Look down there.
I second.
Matt, second?
Slam the table, but
right.
I second it.
All right, so we have a motion to go past 11 o'clock. We have a second by Matt. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carries 5-0. All right, let's go. Thanks. So thanks. We'll move on to item D5. Scott Graham.
Thank you, Mayor Ayers, members of the council. This evening you have a request for authorization to execute an agreement with the Timmons Group for implementation of the CityWorks permit tracking and asset management system. We've been talking about this for a while now through the budget process for permit tracking, and then we've sort of added in the asset management and work order program because that's something that Public Works was separately pursuing. So I guess the first question you'd ask is, why are we doing this? And so that would be a good question to ask. The city currently, for the permitting side of things, uses HDL permits for the tracking and issuance of building, planning, building and planning permits and encroachment permits, as well as for business licenses. The system does not include a public-facing component. It does not include a routing function. So you can't route things out to other departments. When the planning application comes in, we route it out to other departments for comment. We route building permit applications out to other departments for comments when it's in plan check. It doesn't. Our current system doesn't do that. System does not allow online submittals. It's not a system that's workflow based, so it doesn't mirror the processes that we go through when we're processing applications. It's pretty far from state of the art, I would say. On the asset management side of things, we are sort of similarly positioned. The city currently utilizes a couple of different systems. We utilize SIMS and CUPS in the wastewater collection system. CUPS stands for Checkup Program for Small Systems, and SIMS stands for Sewer Information Maintenance Management System. Sounds, I guess, somewhat impressive, but I think they're a little more than spreadsheets. And our worksheet and our work order system is pretty much tracked through paper work orders and Excel spreadsheets as well. So the current system does not allow for publicly generated requests. Doesn't allow for those requests to be tracked or for information to go back out to the community when they give us requests. And that current process of asset management work order systems probably takes the equivalent of 2 full-time employees, which is why Public Works was already going down the road to pursue this, because it was going to gain quite a bit of staff time back, maybe towards folks being out in the field and things like that, as opposed to sitting around doing paperwork and trying to track everything that the other folks that were out in the field were actually on the work they were actually doing. So moving forward, so community development and Public Works got together. When we started researching these things, we saw that some of the systems had similar components in it that could do both. So the decision was made to combine our efforts moving forward to look for an enterprise system, again, that did both. We reviewed 6 separate software solutions. The ones that we liked the most were, again, this workflow-based that followed us through our processes and were implemented in that manner. So they could be tailored to the way we do business, specifically here in Morro Bay versus the out-of-the-box thing, and you have to tailor what you do to what comes out of the box. The CityWorks system that we're looking to go to, we found it to be the most comprehensive and customizable solution for the price that it costs on a yearly basis, which is $22,500, which is very reasonable for both components. The system is GIS-centric, so it's kind of map-based. It's nice. You can have your assets on there. You can have your permits located on a map, so people can bring it up on the outside, look at it. They get a little postcard in the mail, so they got an application next to them pending. They can go, click on it, look at what's happening, get a project description, look at plans potentially, see where it is in the process, that type of thing. Again, so it has that public-facing portal. Which is, I think, a significant improvement over what we have now. Continuing on with highlights, it will allow for online submittal of projects and business licenses, so people can do it online. That's certainly something we've been talking about for a while now. It does integrate well with other third-party software. Specifically, we're already currently internally looking at citizen request management systems, also called, I think, customer relationship management systems, depending on which one you're looking at. Those allow for the logging and tracking of service requests from the outside, from the public using the internet or potentially mobile phone applications. And again, we are currently working on acquisition of that type of software that will be implemented with CityWorks once we get CityWorks in place. So CityWorks partners with outside companies for the implementation of their solution. In this location, the Timmons Group is one of the CityWorks Platinum partners, which is their highest rated implementation partner, and really the only one doing business on the West Coast. So we got a cost quote for implementation for both permitting and asset management work orders of $278,000. That was well beyond the resources that we'd allocated for this project, well beyond to the tune of about $70,000. When we made CityWorks and Timmons Group aware of that, they worked with us to reduce the overall cost while keeping the system and the implementation as robust as as robust as they could, and in keeping it in line with what was originally proposed. So they're not cutting down the service much, just the cost. The implementation, they have a comprehensive 34-step process that they take you through. It's broken into the 2 phases: asset management, permitting. The asset management component includes water distribution, water production, wastewater collection, wastewater treatment. It includes stormwater, streets, traffic, street trees, parks. The permitting component includes business licensing, building permits, encroachment permits, planning permits, inspections, and code enforcement. Again, it's a fairly robust system. We were exciting that we found something that is this workflow-based process. And again, we're looking for authorization to enter into an agreement for the implementation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Great, Scott. Thanks. Questions to my right? Noah?
No questions. I had a chance to speak with Scott earlier, specifically just about contract termination clauses and so forth, and he affirmed that those are there, and just asking some more questions about the internal training with staff and the plan there, and I'm confident that we've got something in place to succeed with this.
All right, great. John?
Scott, just one question. Is it very labor intensive for staff to update any portion of the system, or is this something that pretty much on an annual basis is maintained via the contract?
The contract, so any updates to the software are rolled out, and that's part of the annual fee that we pay. It's part of the annual $22,500. Oops.
Great. Hey, Scott, on the initial management partners report, which was great for the city to evaluate their IT. Basically, there's a lot of things that came from that report that came to us, as far as budget time, and then even goal setting. We evaluated IT. Part of that was evaluating our HDL system. So this proposal here is for CityWorks. Can you explain why we're looking at CityWorks and why HDL wasn't? What's a comparison? So what other products are out there to compare CityWorks and HDL? If we wanted to upgrade HDL, I mean, what kind of information can you give council to let us know that HDL might have had the same type of product, but we needed to spend $300,000, or just give me some dialogue there.
Well, HDL apparently has gone through an upgrade to their system. It still doesn't do this workflow-based component. They told us they were going through the upgrade, and I reached out with them and said, oh, yeah, sure. And this was a while ago. It was like when I first started working here, actually, so a little over a year ago. I found out they were doing this upgrade when I inquired about getting an additional license for business licenses. And they said, oh, we have this coming down the road. And I said, well, absolutely. Let me know when it's ready to roll out. And I said, oh, it'll be ready to roll out around the beginning of the year. And they never called me. And so, fast forward to today, it seems like they've gone through the process to do some of the upgrading. But again, it doesn't have the features that CityWorks has as far as the implementation component of it goes, with having that workflow based. It has a dashboard on it that individuals can tailor to so they can see all the work that's going on. It's really great for managers. You can see where any given project is in the process. You can see all of the workload that your staff has with regard to at least the permitting side of things, and it works the same way on the asset management component of it as well on the public works side. So you can see where folks are at, in the work order component of it. You can see what how many projects individual planners are working on, or how many plan checks the building inspector has, that type of thing. It allows you to track all of those types of things and see it on one screen. It's
okay.
Pretty great.
So Scott, I think one key thing is the HDL one is not customer facing at all.
Yeah.
So it is purely a staff management tool. It has no customer-facing piece. And as we looked at the business licensing part of it, it was just very, very clunky and was no improvement on the paper that we use right now.
So that's a good explanation of why we're not upgrading HDL. How about other software products or tools of this type of nature? Was there any other ones to compare that?
There's lots of other project tracking softwares that cities utilize, and we reviewed, again, a total of 6. So 3 of the other ones that we looked at were kind of a semi-customized, out of the box. You got to tailor your processes to how they come out of the box, which is not great. And a couple of them didn't have the work order or asset management component of it at all. So we would have had to go our separate ways. We already have a lot of disparate systems in this city, and so Rob and I were trying to hey, let's get rid of a couple of them, put them together, was kind of the idea. And work orders can be used for other things like code enforcement and things like that. So we thought it would be good if we had the system together all in one piece. We thought that would be very valuable. And so we were trying to focus on products that gave us the full package, because the city hasn't had that ability in the past. And we recognize that. I think the city would benefit greatly by having one system, one source for all of these things, and something that the public can see where things are at when they put hey, there's graffiti on the wall over there. They can now, once we get this all implemented, track what's happening with it. I think that's pretty fantastic,
yeah,
actually.
That's great.
So.
Scott just said system a couple of times in one sentence, so I'm going to ask Mr. System to make a comment or two.
Sure. Scott basically said a lot of kind of what's in my head. As we kind of went through this process, Public Works and Community Development did 99.9% of the legwork on this. I really came in at the end because I was hired starting June. But where we're really going with IT, obviously, is we're working on a strategic plan right now to inform us on our overall process for IT. For how we go about many things. We're currently in the SWOT analysis process, but I think we've informed ourselves that there are some pretty obvious things that we need to work on. Most especially, what I've heard from every single department is a concern regarding disparate systems. And that's a really tough thing for every municipality, especially municipalities at a small level. You'd think that being smaller would make them more efficient in how they get systems, but no. Every city department, typically at a small city, does their own thing with software because they're very focused on their function. The benefit of this is really the team you have already, in that Scott and Rob work so well together in recognizing that you could have one tool for 2 departments that we really need. The biggest challenge with most of these software companies, as Scott said, is that almost none of them did all of the things that we really were hoping for in terms of asset management and permitting. So we were not able to find really anything other than CityWorks that did all of this, plus the customer-facing aspect of it, plus something that will integrate with our constituent relationship management system, which will be replacing the Let Us Know function on the website, which will give us a new app for folks, which will literally even call people to let them know how we're doing. This CityWorks, we're actually as part of this, we're actually going to be purchasing the API, which is basically the system of protocols that allows it to speak to our new CRM system. And they'll all be integrated together so that when someone goes on Let It Know, which we might rebrand so people know we have a new system in place, when they let us know about something, it'll immediately feed into CityWorks. And the guys who work in facilities and fix stuff don't have to worry about going into this app. Here, they can go stay in one product the whole time, work off one product. When they make any modification in that product, it'll inform the outside of what's happening. That person, so a tree limb falls in their, on the sidewalk. They let us know about it. We do something about it. We update it, and they literally get a phone call, that we've done something. And so, I think as we were doing this, there was no company that could do everything that CityWorks will do for us. So this is a major benefit, especially for the cost. $22,000 a year is kind of amazing, to be honest.
Thanks for that. And one final question: as far as it's been it was 2000 when we last did this with HDL. So, 15 years with, pardon me, right? No upgrades. So as we go through strategic IT planning, what would we envision upgrading something like this? Are we, IT moves pretty quickly. Are we looking at something, would something like this be every 5 years, every 10 years?
So as part of the strategic planning process, we're also, I can't confirm it yet because haven't published that yet, but obviously part of this is that we are very much lacking in procurement policies. We're lacking right now in an actual capital improvement program, a CIP for IT. And so part of the strategic planning process is really informing that vision for building a procurement policy and building an actual CIP for all of our IT systems, whether it be software or hardware. When we replace things, we'll be informed by numerous factors. One being how quickly do these things update, the affordability of these products, the necessity of doing so, and based on the things that we do. So I can't really fully answer that right now because it's context based.
Okay. That concludes my questions. Thanks, Matt.
So with this initial outlay of $210,000 and the yearly $22,000, is that what you're saying? Have you done, in terms of the continuity or the meshing together, the cohesiveness between the departments, have you rough ballparked the cost analysis of how much we might save doing something like this?
Well, there's going to be we haven't analyzed the cost savings, but there's going to be a huge amount of time savings out of this because right now when someone walks to the counter and asks what the status of a project is, here's how it goes. Somebody walks up and says, I like to know where my building permit is in the process. So this is what happens. The permit tech goes, okay, what's the address? Looks the address up, looks in HDL and goes, oh, yep, okay, we do have an application there at least. And she goes and walks back and has to go around to all the departments and look in every door and ask who is responsible for reviewing this and see if we responded or not. You have to go to a file and look in there. I have one response. Rick responded, but I don't have anything from building, I don't have anything from planning, and you have to go around to those individual folks and find out if they're in the building, when they're going to respond, what have you, and then go back up to the front. That happens 30 times a day. I mean, our system right now is terrible, and if it were to happen and we had City Works in place, she would just look on it and go, oh, okay, it's been routed, Rick's responded, and we're waiting for planning and building. They'd be able to look it up right there on the screen. In fact, the person asking the question wouldn't even have to come in.
They would say, here, let me teach you how to look at it online if you'd like, so you can check on it tonight and tomorrow morning.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of time savings is going to be incredible once we go down the road.
And believe it or not, right now, your city staff uses Let Us Know as a work order system. So if Recreation has trouble with a computer, they will do a Let Us Know to IT to say, I was getting frustrated because I was like, why is the staff and using Let Us Know to talk to each other? Why don't we talk to each other like real people? Or go on our workflow management system and put in a work order. That we don't have one. So we actually use Let Us Know for it. It's pretty cool.
And one of the most important side benefits that we really haven't even touched on is the fact that most of these work processes don't exist. They're not well defined. And as we go through this process, we're going to be forced to define those processes. And you got to define it before you can improve it.
That's a great point.
Great. Christine?
Just one question that possibly hasn't been asked yet. But so initially, you were looking for something in planning, Scott, and then Mr. Leivick's team was looking for something in public works. So we were, until you collaborated, we were going down two different paths, potentially with two separate systems.
In early November at a staff meeting, I found out that actually Recreation at the time, because they had maintenance, was about to purchase one system, and Public Works was about to purchase the same system and buy two licenses for it to solve one piece of this problem. And,
but they hadn't been collaborating. In other words,
right.
They weren't sure. They didn't know the other person was about to make the same purchase.
Exactly.
So it's
Which
like
is
buying the
why
same pair of shoes, you and your best friend, thinking they're...
For the same wife.
I don't even know how to follow up on that. So I'll go back over here to Mr. Graham. But that essentially was what was happening.
We actually found CityWorks through Public Works. Public Works, the folks out at the yard were looking at it for wastewater, for the asset management component for wastewater and work orders, and they had demoed it at least once. And so they were going to demo it again, and they said, hey, we know, they heard, or someone heard, Rob did, he's like, oh, you're looking for a permitting system. CityWorks has one. You should talk to the guy. Mm-hmm. I was like, okay. So I called him up, and we did a demo real quick with it and took a look at it, and I was like, wow, this is far better than the other three we've already looked at. I said, I need to find a couple other ones that do it like, CityWorks does with this workflow thing, because I thought it was fantastic. And so we kind of changed gears at that point, and he made us look at a couple of the other ones that did workflow as well. Those other folks just didn't have the asset management or work order component to it.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. I understand that. Yeah, and I think this is what we're looking for when we say in Goal 10D to fundamentally remake IT operations in the city. So, this is what we've asked staff to do, and it's what we budgeted for. So, I think I have one last question. It was a basic one. So, residents are going to look at that and look at this staff report and see the money that's being spent. They think, well, who cares to me? But actually, now that through your presentation, there really isn't anyone, unless they never interface with the city for anything, that may not come in contact with the system. So this is for potholes, this is for graffiti, this potentially would be for my building project or anything.
It's going to affect most interactions with the city, yes.
Okay, so Big Brother's coming, and its name is CityWorks. It's okay, maybe. Okay, great. Yeah, thanks. I think your presentation answered a lot of questions, and thanks for the good questions from council.
Thanks. And with that, we'll open it for public comment. For those who'd like to speak to this item, please come forward. Seeing none, we'll close public comment and bring it back to council. Thanks very much. And thanks for everybody's comments on that. Any other discussion items? Noah, you want to lead us off in discussion or anything?
No, I think it's important for people to understand that there is some risk when you consolidate to one server, and that the Timmons Group has a long-standing reputation and performance record. I took a little bit of time to try to find something negative about them online, and I'm not as good as some of the citizens in our community are, but I wasn't able to find any negative reviews or problems they've had with other communities they're working with. They are motivated to break into the state more, and so I think that's one of the reasons why Scott was able to do the negotiations that he was to get the price down to our budgeted range. So excellent work, Mr. Graham, on that. And I think the ball will be in our court to work really closely with our own staff. It's outlined very well in the proposal to make sure that we're successful with this integration. And I think our staff's up for the job, so I'm supportive.
Great. Noah. John?
It's amazing to me the reduction in price apparently that you got looking at comparative data and systems. So congratulations on that too. The integration is I'm glad I heard strategic or SWOT analysis for IT integration of systems, because we are significantly behind the times, and this all-inclusive ability to look at literally anything in a process, for me, is going to be an outstanding improvement and increase the productivity of your department rather dramatically, as you've stated. So I'm well for this. I would support this. Adam?
Great. Matt? You good? Christine?
In support.
Great. Me too. Great discussion, great questions, great work, Scott. Thanks for all this. It's exciting when we talk about community development in particular. And we've talked about increasing our impact fees, and for all the right reasons. And one of those reasons is providing good service. And this is one of those tools that is focused directly on providing good service. So that's great to have. With that, take a motion to staff recommendation to award consultant contract for implementation of City Works permit tracking and asset management software solution to the Timmons Group Incorporated.
Second.
We have a motion by Matt, a second by John. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries 5-0. Terrific. Now, moving on to item D.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks. Moving on to item D6, consideration of proposal and contract award to Mike Nunley and Associates for program management services for development construction management of new WRF. And that would be...
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I'm terribly sorry, but can we take a brief break?
Thank you.
I think we've been going for quite a while, and
Okay.
I know this is a long item,
Yep.
and I'm sorry to even ask, but
Okay.
Okay.
I would support
Thank you
that.
for honoring
Thanks.
that.
Thank you. We'll be back in 5 minutes.